All right, welcome to another episode of the EsportsNext podcast. It is my pleasure today, along with, as always, the lovely co-host, Miss Megan Van Petten, who is the founder of the Esports Trade Association, to welcome Mike Busse, who is an account executive with Encore Global, played a key part in our annual EsportsNext conference. Thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we want to take our audience here through your path in esports, both starting out playing, I believe, StarCraft 2 in way back in 2009.
Yes, that's
We
right.
want to also share some of your insights, your experience in the space from that time to today. Share with us how you just originally got involved with playing StarCraft 2, which is known as kind of the origin title for global esports.
Sure. I mean, oh, wow. It goes even further before StarCraft 2 in that sense, right? Like StarCraft Brood War was the first game that I purchased with my own allowance, and I felt really cool about that. So it always kind of had a very special part in my heart. And then once StarCraft 2 came out, I thought, you know what, this is going to be the game that I really get into, that I really spend some time on. And I spent too much time on it. And at that point, I was like, yes, I could play competitively. And I saw that there was a market for it. I went for it, had a good time.
Wow. How far down the path competitively did you get before you had your eyes open and you were like, I don't think this is the long-term plan?
You know, there comes a time in every competitive player's life where they reach a master rank or a top rank of something and they think there's got to be something more than that. Where, I was playing originally where I don't even know if Grandmaster was a rank yet in StarCraft 2, but I had reached like the top-ish level of master, and I was like, you know what, this is fun. I'm having a good time sitting behind my computer and playing these games, but I wonder if there is a place where people can go and play these things in person, maybe win a little money and maybe win a little fame, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I went into it from there. Just started doing some research and found that there were places in Toronto, where I live, where they were hosting those kind of tournaments. So I was I went in on that.
That's pretty cool. And because a lot of our audience are people who are coming into the space and they're learning about esports, they're bringing, of course, their complementary expertise, but they may
Sure.
not have been playing competitive games for decades. Can you give us a little bit of background of what is StarCraft 2 and what makes it such a great esports title?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. StarCraft 2 is a real-time strategy game, which those kind of games have kind of fallen by the wayside, I want to say, recently. Uh, you may have heard of titles such as Warcraft. You may have heard of Age of Empires, that whole series of games. But essentially, you're given a base and some units to collect resources, and then from there, you develop an army. You put that army against another army, and then whoever can destroy the opponent's base first is the winner.
Yep. Great description there. I'm curious, in Toronto, where you said you grew up,
Yeah,
we know that South Korea is where, these PC bangs originated and so did esports, my team against your team, sort of a thing. What was it like in Toronto in 2009, especially compared to today, where we have, professional teams that are owned by big companies and compete globally?
sure. It was very small organizations, people who weren't even calling themselves organizations at the time, people who just wanted to put together events and locations for people to go and play. There were a lot of Facebook groups. There was a lot of things done over Facebook at the time,
Hmm.
to get people to go over to venues that had either said that it was all right that people came in and played a couple hours of games, or at the time there was also Barcraft, which was uh, kind of taking the feed from South Korea, where StarCraft was way more popular by far and had a lot of a tighter grasp on the broadcast and streaming side of things. and bar crafts were a place where we all just kind of sat, had some beers, had some snacks and whatever, and watched competitive StarCraft from Korea. That was a really interesting time because it was, at all the bars at the time, that was a place where you would watch sports, and here we're
I was going
finally
to ask,
watching
yeah.
esports that we've been wanting to watch for so long. So it's
So
good.
was this like a gaming themed bar, or was it like your traditional sports bar and they're like, "Hey, we're switching the from ESPN over to the StarCraft channel." What
Well,
was the dynamic there?
yeah, it's interesting how that happened, right? Like there was at first it was just a bar that would have an esports night. And then eventually a few gaming centered bars would pop up here and there. A few esports centered bars would pop up here
Hmm.
and there. I could only really think of two off the top of my head, and one that had like several major rebrands over the years, but that were solely focused on esports in a bar setting. And those ones were interesting because they had not only the bar, but in the back, they would have kind of an internet cafe attached to it.
Hmm.
So it would give people a place to go and play all these games that they're sitting there watching. And now that's kind of evolved into more of a casual sense. Barcades are huge
Yeah.
around the country now, and they certainly weren't, what, 6, 7 years ago. Um, wow, I'm even talking like 14 years ago here, but yeah, it's they're rampant now and they're wonderful. They have such a great business model where you can sit there and play games and enjoy being social with friends in both the
Hmm.
game sense and the sit down at a table with a beer sense. It's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember years ago, Buffalo Wild Wings was introducing like a esports night at their locations, and
Oh,
there was
cool.
a ton of pushback against it because the typical consumer was there to watch traditional sports. And then they come in and they're like, "Hey, it's Counter-Strike night," or I know they became the center to I think watch Hearthstone, I want to
Oh,
say.
sure. Yeah.
And so, I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but it's interesting just to see. And this was probably, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, when they attempted this, but to see the adoption of
Mm.
that sort of a thing. And I'm curious if it would be successful at the same locations now at Buffalo Wild Wings, which is such a traditional sports uh, entity, restaurant, or you've got to create your own, gaming specific restaurant to be successful because there's more adoption and more understanding, more mainstream um, viewership. There's still this pretty big gap between a hardcore traditional sports fan base saying, "Hey, put Monday Night Football back on,"
Right.
and what am I watching on the screen here?
That's really interesting because, I think sports bars do a really good job at being subtle about what sports they're showing at the time. If it's not like a Monday Night Football or like a specific event that everybody's wanting to watch. Um, with things like, I don't know, darts or poker, sometimes you go to a sports bar and that's just on in the background and nobody bats an eye.
Right.
Um, I think when it comes to esports broadcasts in sports bars, it would be interesting to see if you just change that channel from darts or poker over to Hearthstone, how many people would actually complain about that. Because I think the problem and the understandable side from the people who are not in esports going into these bars and seeing esports on the thing is that if if it's blaring out into the restaurant, if they're making a point of making sure that you watch this broadcast while you're at this
Right.
sports bar, maybe that's a little intrusive and that could people feel a little excluded. But right now, if I go to a Buffalo Wild Wing, anytime I go to America, I usually try and stop by there at least once. Um, right now, if I go in there, then I can just tune out whatever sport is playing because they're not super obnoxious about it. They don't
Yeah.
blare the sport. I'm not a sports guy. I'm an esports guy,
Yeah.
but I can still enjoy going to a wing place.
It's interesting too because you make a great point about like the audio broadcast,
Mm.
right? If anybody's been to Buffalo Wild Wings, there's more than one TV. Let's just put it that. Um, but shoutcasting is such a big part of the broadcast and the
Mhm.
event itself that obviously if you're really in tune with playing the game, you can follow a game without the casting. But a big part of what builds those moments is the caster and the climax of their voice and um, all this stuff. The other thing I would say,
That's true.
and it's kind of funny as we're going down this little tangent. It's what I love about this show. You never know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Is the title. So Hearthstone is something that the casual viewer might walk in and be like, "The heck's going on?" Right?
Right.
League of Legends is going to be a similar experience. But what if you had Rocket League up there? And I guarantee you have Rocket League on there. Your kids are at least like, yeah, they're cars playing soccer.
Hmm.
And it's something that you can follow, something that is pretty close to traditional sports. I would argue it's probably easier and more enjoyable to follow than even Madden, where you're simulating what is done on the field in real life in
Yeah.
the other broadcast they watch. It'd be interesting to do some like A/B testing of like what you said with the audio, and then also in this restaurant we did League of Legends. In this one we did Rocket League. In this one we did
Yeah.
Valorant.
And it depends on what kind of food. It depends if people, how long people are sitting there for, because the League of Legends game can go for 40 minutes at a time. A Rocket League game can go for a little bit less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so seeing people, and yeah, like if it's a sports bar, having people watch through a Rocket League game and seeing the similarities between traditional sports. But also, then we're looking outside of bars too, right? There are other places that have TVs that can go and share broadcasts. I would love to see Hearthstone at a card shop.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that's a great location for it, right? One thing that when I was at GameStop, we facilitated partnerships with all these different Overwatch League teams.
sure.
And it was when Overwatch was in Blizzard Arena in LA. So I think Burbank specifically. So just for the audience who is not familiar, Overwatch launched a global league with 12 teams globally that started, and I think the second year it went to 16.
Mhm.
Well, at GameStop, we're trying to figure out, hey, how do we, take this passion that is esports and, enhance their experiences, get them become fans of GameStop. Well, shout out to the Dallas Fuel, my buddy Shea Butler out there. They did a watch party for the very first game, and they didn't even do anything like super cool or specific. They just invited a bunch of gamers out to an official Dallas Fuel watch party at a bar. 700 people showed up.
Wow. Whoa.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
And then we did all sorts of different things. So I did partnerships with, I think it was nine of the 11 US based teams, because my purview was the United States. And like the New York Excelsior, they did something. They had I think it's called Five Deadly Venoms, is like their esports community. So they bring together people who are playing all sorts of different games, and they had like these tokens that are numbered, so you can only get a token if you're part of the crew. And there's only like 100 of them or something. And so if you have your token with you, you get like a free drink at the bar or
Nice.
something like that. And then we had our good friends in South Florida, Justin Stefanovich and the Misfits. They did a watch party inside of the Miami Heat Stadium where they watched it on the Jumbotron because Miami Heat is part of their ownership group. So it's just like really, really interesting from the standpoint of it doesn't necessarily have so much to do with the location, maybe, but that you are reaching the right fan base
Certainly. Absolutely.
with the
And
right.
the fact that it was when you started with GameStop, when you first mentioned GameStop, I was like, how are they going to bring people inside their store to go and watch that? Well, they weren't. They brought them inside a bar to go and watch that. They facilitated that.
Mm-hmm.
Companies don't have to necessarily do things out of their own location. They can go and, outsource, look at the resources, look at where people go,
Go to
and
the
help
community. Don't try
bring
to get
things
them
to community. Yeah,
from
exactly.
you. And I'll tell you what, the second time that we did it, we had GameStop wristbands
Mhm.
that were team branded. So I had a team and GameStop logos on these wristbands. And if you went to a local GameStop store to get your wristband, you had special VIP privileges at the watch party.
Very cool.
So
Yeah,
that
that'd be awesome.
was the foot driving tactic on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they have historically done quite a bit for the gaming community, the esports community. As you can probably see, I'm a big Pokemon nerd. And one of the things that GameStop has always done very well is bring people inside their store for, promotions that Pokemon's had, getting people over there to get a certain Pokemon that's incredibly rare or is otherwise impossible to get. So they do quite a bit of good work there. I like that.
They do. And I want to bring this conversation back to you
Yeah.
specifically. We've talked kind of about everybody but you and your company, Encore Global here. Did you, when you're competing in 2009, did
Mhm.
you ever think that you would be working in this industry off of the stage or behind the stage rather than competing on it?
No, never. I did not think that I would ever work backstage or help put on the events that I was actually going to. Uh, I think that I was just thinking about this on the car ride over here, that this is kind of the new generation of, I think, people going into the broadcast industry. Historically, over the past probably 3 years, the broadcast industry has been seeing an interesting decline because there's been a switch from just strictly in-person events to in-person and remote, or fully hybrid, or fully remote. And it's a full skill set that I think a lot of people either don't have or realize that it's their time to go and step back and let other people jump in. And the people who are kind of picking up the torch and running with that are people who have been streaming for the past 15 years, people who have been in broadcast, whether they know it or not, for the past 15 years. And so that was me, right? I had my whole career in streaming prior to joining Encore. I would do things in Pokemon. So I would go and stream the game. I would host podcasts. I have currently a YouTube channel that I'm very active on, that is fully centered around Pokemon in esports. And at some point there was this switch that flipped in my brain. It was my best friend who sent me a job posting for a separate company at the time, who said, "You would be perfect for this. This is exactly what you do." And I looked at it and I was like, that's not what I do. That I'm not facilitating broadcasts. And then I thought about it. I said, well, yes, I am. It's just I wasn't facilitating broadcasts for other people. And so when that came into the mix, I was like, okay, I think it's time to actually make a career out of this. And that's exactly what happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's amazing when you take yourself out of the job description. We actually have a member company that you met.
Yeah.
People Works.
Yes.
That literally helps you find what you love doing and pairs you with a company that actually does, that actually helps you do what you love.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't put it together themselves. So it's fascinating that that's what you did. And I wonder if that's why Encore is thriving and it's such a great group of people, really from the top down, or
Absolutely.
the top horizontally.
Absolutely, Megan. Yeah, I really do appreciate the forward thinking of that, thinking that there are people out there who have been putting so much time in learning so much of the industry that they don't, that is normally taught in school. People are self-teaching right now because they can.
Right.
And there are still people who do that in university, and people who learn that going for the express purpose of working in broadcast. And then there are the people who don't know that they're they've got all the skills to work in broadcast. I've been saying for a while that like once Twitch streamers realize that there's a full career in working in the back end, so many of them are going to flood over to broadcast because it's waiting for them.
Oh my gosh. And the harmony in your team, like when I went to your Toronto kickoff event, that was one of the best executed events I've ever seen.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. A big part of the success of that, I think, is that so many of the people who've done great work on those kind of shows, people like Adam Joshua, who I think you've had on the podcast before, people like Caroline Vanny, like we have all been personalities on and off screen. We have we know what it's like to put on a great show. We know what it's like to feel that anxiety of wanting to put on a great show. And so, you know, having that mentality going into a show, knowing how to put that passion first is it's super important. It's key. You can't go into something trying to put something together without having some kind of passion for it. Otherwise you'll feel it if you don't.
John, don't you think there's just something about it? He looks at me and I look at him like through the whole course of our show for a couple of days, and we're like, yeah, it's good. It's good. There's just magic. There is something where words can't explain, almost like trying to tell someone your dream that was so vivid.
Yes.
When you do this work, the hospitality component of show production from behind the scenes, planning the stage, a whole year we plan EsportsNext. And when it comes together, it's just, what do you say, John?
It's incredibly fulfilling. You know, it's so cool when you have the opportunity to bring something to life that matters to so many people.
Sure.
Right. And this event, whether it's EsportsNext, whether it's the Toronto chapter launch, whether it's an esports tournament, this thing could not happen without you and your team executing it. And the enjoyment of the attendees is greatly tied to what you execute, how well you execute this. And I think what's so cool, Mike, is that what you're doing with Encore, it's very similar to just kind of like the mission of ESTA as a whole. You are this person who has been playing competitive video games probably your whole life, right? And Encore is a company coming from outside the space who they have a deep expertise in producing live events.
Yes.
Right. And so to deliver that then for the esports community, they bring you on and some other folks who have similar backgrounds, I'm sure, and you're able to share collaborative, complementary knowledge to do something better than either you could do on your own or that they could do on their own.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to see it happen.
It's really interesting to see something created from people who want to make something larger than just the sum of their parts. Making those magic moments in events is what we all live for. Both of you as well. It's all about that. And with EsportsNext, there were several magic moments, but for those who were not attending and were considering attending, I highly recommend that. Because there were just so many opportunities for those magic moments to be created or to take advantage of the magic moments that were kind of put out in front of us. Two that I will divulge if you'll let me.
Please.
Is the speed dating section. We had a speed dating section at the end of EsportsNext, and it was wild. It was amazing. I love talking with so many people so fast and so here, there, and everywhere. But like, I've had so many conversations after the fact from people who I only had a small amount of time to talk to, because you fit so much in when you can only talk with someone for 2 minutes at a time.
Yeah, and just to give our listeners who were not at EsportsNext an idea there, essentially, the goal of this speed networking session is to identify as quick as possible who is in the room who is complementary to your business, or that you are complementary to theirs. So many times we'll go to an event and possibly the most valuable person we could have met, we don't meet because we never came across them. Right. So at the beginning, we say, okay, let us help you identify who do you want to spend the next 2 days with, building relationships that are good. And hey, the people who are not complimentary to your business, we love those people too. But we've got a limited amount of time. And so if you're looking to take somebody out to dinner, or you're going to grab a drink later, or, you know, meet people at the Coffee Connections IRL, you know who you want to sit next to and bring along during those moments.
I want to highlight one part of that you just said, because I think it really will resonate with a lot of people, where there's a lot of focus on the things that do happen at an event. I think there is not a ton of focus on the things that don't happen in an event. And I'll get to what that means in a little bit. But first, in the speed networking session, you mentioned how there were some people that you do really gel with, and some people who your business or your what you're trying to do is not incredibly relevant for.
Right.
I think that is just as important as finding out what your business can gel with, because you're meeting with people who are in the industry as well, doing things around what you're doing, and you never know how many times you guys will go and cross paths. So I mean, you never know, right?
Well, sometimes it's just the difference of a business priority shifting, or sometimes you're looking for a job and they're the hiring manager, or they're looking for someone, or, you know, just building a very robust and diverse network has a lot of value to it. There's all sorts of people I know who are in the traditional sports space and things of that nature, that it's like, well, yeah, what I do today on a daily basis, there's no immediate business opportunities, but they're great connections. They're great to learn from. And you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
And if you one of the reasons I love trade associations is, you know, obviously we break it down to one trade, and they're actually smaller communities. Believe it or not, they average to be around 400 leaders.
Wow.
And influencers is the average number for a trade association event. So we are just like right on clockwork for the average. And there is rotation of, you know, in that 100 to 200 amount of people. When John and Charles brought that particular event to the community, I thought it was brilliant. Of course, it was two single guys that thought we should do speed dating.
We're in speed dating, but
it is, you know, one of our pillar parts of our program, because it is a very small world when you really look, and why not help your friend, because they're under the same tent that you are. So it's really awesome to hear that.
Absolutely. And then the other part of EsportsNext, which I really appreciated, and what I meant earlier by the things that don't happen at an event, is in between sessions, giving the event that space to breathe was so nice, because we had the chance to go and speak with, one, some of the people who were up on stage, but two, some of the people that the people on stage would go and identify, say, oh, I see X organization out in the audience. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I really want to go and talk with them. Or I've seen them a couple of years ago. I used to interview people from this industry. So I've got to see a couple of people who I haven't seen in years. So having that time to go out into the hall and chat with them over drinks, over coffee, where the tables were provided there for everyone to just kind of go and sit down and have chats with each other, I thought was really powerful. And then the ability to bring everyone back into the room for the next session was equally important, but very fun as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's great to hear feedback, to understand what we're doing that is adding value, so we can continue to do it and do it even better next year. I love we had a real strong focus on access to people this
Sure.
year.
Yeah.
There's a number of events, both within esports and beyond esports, where you have a speaker flies in, appears for the panel, don't look him in the eyes, exits, and is
Yeah.
gone. And I've even been on some of those panels where it's like, hey, is so and so showing up? And then it's like, yep, I'm here for the panel. It's like, hey, you want to grab a bite after? So,
Nah, I
nope,
gotta go.
gotta go. And
Yeah.
so while we do understand people's, travel restrictions or what have you, if they've got a lot of places to be, one thing that we wanted to provide is access, that you see that person speak on stage, you probably have a bunch of questions for them. Also, other side of the coin, it's extremely valuable for the speaker to be able to further connect with the audience, because when
Certainly.
you're seeing somebody as a thought leader or someone you're learning from, there's a great chance that you're going to reach out to them, for something that is going to put some money in their pocket or help accomplish their business goals.
That's right. Absolutely. There's so many situations I can think of off the top of my head that where if there was just an extra 2 hours where the person who flew in for that conference to speak would just stay around for a little bit,
Yeah.
I feel like they would create a lot more business for not only their company, but they would create a lot more experiences for themselves. Obviously, there would be for the people who are speaking with them, but I think the extra step that a lot of those thought leaders can take, that if they're not already doing, is to spend a little bit more time actually talking to the people that they're talking to.
Yeah, that's a really strong point. Last thing is, we have about 5 minutes here with this episode, is I know that one aspect of the esports industry that you're very aware of and have a little concern about is sustainability.
Yes.
Right? Share with us a little bit some of your thoughts on sustainability, some of your concerns, and perhaps some solutions if you see any possible ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think collaboration has always been the name of the game for people. And that's why these trade associations exist. That's why networking in general exists, because people can do a lot more if they're working together with different organizations, with different companies, with different people within those companies, in their own companies. And so one thing I see esports struggling a little. No, one opportunity I can see with esports right now is the ability to work with multiple people at a time. You see it a lot in conventions. You see it a lot in tournaments from big, large name organizations, as well as kind of mid-size, where they bring in activation partners, where they have people come in and be on the side showing off their product, showing off their service, just talking about what they do. It benefits the activation partner because they get to market to a relevant audience. It benefits the organization because they get to reap any kind of benefits that partnership might have. And I see the really truly successful esports events incorporating multiple people and not just trying to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, because they don't have to. Nobody has to do that. You can bring in as many people as you want. So I mean, that's one thing that I think is happening. I think the other thing is in bringing in people, bringing in eyes, bringing in competitors, bringing in influencers, bringing in people to put their butts in seats. There's a lot of good work that can be done outside of the event through content. I think putting together a good content package for promoting an event, and without being very subtle about the event that's coming up. I think everybody who wants to put on a good event can benefit from being almost micro influencers during the year, putting out content, putting out podcasts like this right here, putting out videos, putting out clips, showing off what's going on in their pocket of the industry, because everybody has their own little pocket of the industry. That's where I think things are.
I love the kind of what we were talking about earlier of like your combination of like your esports expertise and Encore's capabilities.
Yeah.
I love when we have opportunities as an industry to apply those best practices that other industries have, and also recognize those unique nuances that are extremely important, and you definitely have to hit the bullseye on those. But if you just have one or the other, you're going to fall flat. Both together is a powerful combination.
Totally.
Well, before we let you go, last question for you here, Mike, is where can people follow you personally? I think you shared a ton of insight and knowledge in this episode where if I'm listening to this, I'm like, I want to get in touch with that dude. How can people do that?
Well, absolutely. If you want to connect with me, my name is Michael Busse on LinkedIn, Michael Busse.
You can go and check. Audience, please
say again.
Can you spell that for the audience?
That's Busse. And hopefully, if this is over on YouTube or wherever this goes, podcast providers, you can go and check that in the descriptions. We'll have hopefully those links. I'll provide you those links. So LinkedIn, my LinkedIn name is MBUSSE. So it's LinkedIn/in/MBUSSE. Most other places I am at Still Just Mike. Anywhere you find at Still Just Mike, you'll find me. Cool. The Pokemon podcast that I do is Pokesports, a competitive Pokemon podcast and a competitive Pokemon brand. And the company I work for is Encore Global. So you can go and check them out as well. Reach out to me if you need to put together any kind of event anywhere in North America. We're happy to assist.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for all that you shared here today, Mike. I'm going to get my son on that Pokesports podcast because he's going to absolutely love it. He won a massive Pikachu at Six Flags.
No way.
Yeah, he actually, those games that are rigged that you're not able to win?
He won the rigged games?
He's the rigged game.
Whoa, he did it.
And he got a Pikachu the size of himself, which is like 5 feet tall.
That rocks.
Oh my goodness.
I have it on video.
See that picture. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was the bucket. The balls with the bucket, yes. And it always bounces out. So he threw it to where it just hit the very edge and just rolled in, and he did it twice in a row and won the biggest Pikachu you've ever seen in your life. And
the facilitator was crying.
He's like, oh, we don't actually give these out. Nobody wins this game. But yeah, we and Pikachu are definitely going to check out your podcast. So I'm thrilled with that. Everybody who's listening, please give Mike a follow. And if you're in Toronto, you can meet him around the ESTA Toronto chapter. And, next year at the EsportsNext conference, we hope you'll be there as well. So thank you for joining us today on the EsportsNext podcast.